ventilation, and observe personal and environmental hygiene. Always wash your hands. Cover your nose and mouth with tissue paper when sneezing or coughing. Wear a mask if you have symptoms of respiratory infection. See a doctor if symptoms persist or deteriorate. To protect yourself and family members, get vaccinated every year.
To stay healthy, let's fight influenza together.
From a chance encounter.
Hey, buddy. You lost?
They taught me the meaning of loyalty.
You named him?
No, I didn't.
Parker, you want to keep him?
No, I do.
You do.
I don't want to keep him. I'm not trying to.
Admit it, you do.
Every day, come, same time, same place.
Friday. Hachiko, a dog story on Pearl's Weekend Blockbuster.
CY Long hints at adjusting mainland tourist numbers to Hong Kong. Queen Mary Hospital checking staff who may have been exposed to H7N9. And Euro finance ministers approve bailout extension for Greece. Good evening and welcome. In a sign the government may adjust its policy on the number of mainland visitors, the chief executive said today he would raise the issue with Beijing next month. But Leung Chun-ying also said there are no immediate plans to limit the number of individual travelers from China for now. Rani Samtani reports.
The government will not relax the individual visit scheme, says Chief Executive Leung Chun-ying. Speaking before the weekly Executive Council meeting this morning, Leung explained that the number of cities covered by the multiple entry scheme remains at 49, and there will be no increase. He said he had told central government officials that he opposed increasing the number of cities, as Hong Kong has a limited capacity for receiving tourists. The CE also said he knows residents in certain areas are being affected by the large number of mainland visitors. Leung said he will discuss tightening the policy with central government officials next month. The number of mainland visitors during the Lunar New Year holiday was similar to last year. From last Tuesday to Sunday, a total of 802,000 mainland tourists came to Hong Kong. That's 2,000 more visitors compared with last year. However, the number of mainlanders who came under the individual visit scheme dropped. The chief executive said recent protests in shopping malls have affected tourist numbers. Secretary for Commerce and Economic Development Gregory So said the government needs to balance economic development and the city's capacity for receiving tourists.
We must liaise with relevant mainland authorities in terms of how we could balance allowing our tourists to have a very enjoyable experience in Hong Kong while not imposing too much burden on the daily livelihood of people in Hong Kong. It is not an easy balancing act.
Henry Tang, a member of the Standing Committee of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, said the individual visit scheme was brought in to promote economic development after the SARS outbreak. While it has contributed a lot to the local economy, Tang said he feels that it needs to be revised. And retail sector lawmaker Vincent Fang said restricting the number of visitors under the scheme shouldn't have too much of an effect on the tourism industry. He noted that visitors under the scheme don't usually stay the night and only come to buy daily necessities. Rani Samtani, TVB News.
18 more people have died from flu, bringing the death toll from the current outbreak to 273. It comes as a 9-month-old baby who tested positive for influenza A remains in critical condition tonight. The baby is being treated at Prince of Wales Hospital. He had been suffering from a fever, cough, runny nose, and shortness of breath since Saturday. He was admitted to hospital yesterday. Meanwhile, Queen Mary Hospital is contacting 5 medical workers who had handled the recent case of a man infected with H7N9 influenza. They reportedly did not wear any special protective gear when he was first admitted to hospital. Other health news tonight. HIV infections among local youth are on the rise, with experts saying everyone at risk should know how to protect themselves. Stephanie Choi reports there are also calls for the government to do more to educate people.
Joe is HIV positive. He says it's probably due to having unprotected sex with multiple partners over a period of 2 years.
I
was feeling unwell, Joe says, so a few months ago I went for a blood test and the results showed I was HIV positive. The 20-something says he regrets having unprotected sex and cautions young people against going down the same road. But Joe says being a carrier has helped him grow as a person, adding that with the right medication, the virus doesn't really affect his daily life. Before becoming HIV positive, Joe admitted he'd heard of the virus at school, but never took it seriously. The government needs to have an ongoing campaign to raise awareness towards HIV and AIDS, he says. According to the latest government statistics, almost 1,800 people aged between 20 and 29 live with HIV, and close to 200 people in the same age group have AIDS. Over the past few years, there's been an increasing number of young people getting infected with HIV every year. But what do young Hong Kongers know about HIV and AIDS?
People won't talk about it that much because generally you won't think about it because it doesn't affect you.
I'm not really aware of HIV or anything. Not that it's much of my concern.
AIDS Concern Chief Executive Andrew Chiji thinks current sex education guidelines don't provide enough information for young people and educators. He says the government and society need to work harder to make sure young people are informed about safe sex, sexuality and relationships.
We run a lot of workshops for teachers and social workers, and they will say they haven't been given the skills and the knowledge that they need to be able to deliver good education about relationships and sex to young people.
Chiji says it's partly because of this lack of information that many individuals at high risk of getting HIV, such as those with multiple sex partners, don't realize they should get tested.
In the 1980s and 1990s, you had a big AIDS panic and a lot of people were dying. You now have medication that means people can live with HIV on medication. But I think the big message that people have maybe missed is that HIV is still a very serious threat to health.
Stephanie Choi, TVB News.
The Environmental Protection Department says local air quality improved last year, but it also says ozone levels are on the rise. And as our Joel Da Silva explains, that could be a serious problem.
It may come as a surprise, but in 2014 the air was cleaner than in the previous year. That's according to data collected by the Environmental Protection Department's Air Quality Monitoring Network. Reduced concentrations of sulfur dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, carbon dioxide and respirable suspended particulates all seem to point in that direction. The worrying trend, however, is the continued rise in ozone levels, which could signal an upcoming increase in other harmful pollutants.
What concerns our health is not NOx, but NO2, nitrogen dioxide. The NOx, after emission from vehicles, will react with ozone, which come mainly from the region. And then they react to form NO2. Now, if we got ozone increased by 11% in the first three quarters, then probably we expect the NO2 will go up.
Data from air quality monitoring stations in these districts shows air pollution, which posed a high or above level health risk, to be more frequent than elsewhere.
Because they are close to the peripheral delta. And that's why when we are under the influence of the continental airstream, particularly when the air direction is from the westerly or northwesterly direction, then the ozone from the region will affect these three stations more than other places.
At the same time, Mok explains that because weather conditions vary greatly, Yuen Long, Tuen Mun and Tung Chung also record longer than average hours of low health risk air quality. He adds that Hong Kong can't go at it alone in reducing ozone levels here and calls for continued cooperation with Guangdong authorities to tackle the issue. Joel Da Silva, TVB News.
Overseas now, Eurozone finance ministers have agreed to Greece's request for a bailout extension. It comes after Athens pledged not to roll back any ongoing or completed privatizations, reform its tax policies, and review control government spending. The promises were contained in a list of reforms given to Greece's main creditors. Athens was forced on Friday to extend a bailout program on terms its government was just elected to get out of. Eurozone finance ministers agreed to extend the bailout deal for 4 months, provided Greece came up with a list of reforms. And tonight, Eurozone finance ministers agreed to those reforms. France has barred 6 suspected French jihadists from leaving the country. It's the first time the country has seized passports under a sweeping anti-terrorism law passed last year. Authorities imposed the travel bans under a new law aimed at keeping French radicals from gaining violent experience abroad. France's interior minister says some of the 6 young people had been radicalized and were planning to join terrorist fighting in Syria. He says dozens of others will face travel bans in the coming weeks. French authorities say they received information about the suspects from a hotline put in place last year and through ongoing investigations. It's estimated that about 1,400 French citizens have links to recruitment cells for Syria and Iraq, of which about 400 are already fighting alongside militants. The government is especially worried since the deadly Paris attacks last month, in which the gunman claimed ties to Islamic extremists. On the streets of Paris, reaction about the passport seizures is mixed. This man says the seizures don't seem democratic, but if they are high-risk individuals, then appropriate precautions must be taken. If they want to leave, let them leave, says this man, but take away their passports so they can never come back. During a speech to the country's main Jewish organization, President François Hollande said anti-Semitism is on the rise in France, and the government must offer protection to the Jewish community. He said a detailed plan against racism and anti-Semitism will be presented soon. Hollande said about 10,000 soldiers and police officers are protecting synagogues, mosques, schools, and cultural centers and will stay mobilized as long as necessary. Meanwhile, France's Charles de Gaulle aircraft carrier and its naval group have started military operations against Islamic State in Iraq. More than 3,000 French military personnel are now involved in the operation. France was the first country to join the U.S.-led coalition in airstrikes in Iraq against Islamic State insurgents. Former British Foreign Minister Malcolm Rifkin is stepping down as Member of Parliament after being exposed in an alleged cash for access scandal. Another former minister, Jack Straw, is also embroiled in the controversy. Alan Booknia reports.
The interviews were set by British television and newspaper journalists claiming to be with a Hong Kong-based Chinese company.
I'm self-employed, so nobody pays me a salary. I have to earn my income, but when I'm not doing something, I can do what I like.
Jack Straw, the former Foreign Secretary for the Labour Party, talked about how he could work under the radar with his access to politicians and diplomats.
What I can offer you, I could do for you, what's the time commitment? No, obviously, if we get down the track, there's the issue of what fee you have in mind.
Of course.
The sting operation reopened a debate in Britain about political lobbying. Legislators are allowed outside business interests as long as they declare them. Malcolm Rifkin, who currently heads a committee scrutinizing security policy for the ruling Conservative Party, denied any wrongdoing. He did, however, express regret about claiming to have no salary.
Yeah, that was a silly remark on my part. Of course I have a salary as a Member of Parliament. What I was actually talking about was in regards to my various business interests.
Jack Straw had already announced he was retiring from politics when his term ends in May. He says he was talking about what he could do after that.
This was not the way in which I expected to be spending my last few weeks in Parliament, but I've done nothing wrong.
Both Straw and Rifkind were suspended from their party caucuses and have referred themselves to the British Parliament's standards watchdog. Labour Party leader Ed Miliband called for lawmakers to be banned from serving